join us for the pledge? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for what is the fourth and final budget work session of the year. We did finally get the news we were waiting for on the state budget. Ms. Burns will go into it, but we got additionally roughly $100,000 more, which was actually pretty good relative to the rest of the island, because the island actually went down on the whole. So I guess we can't complain, although we always would have preferred more. Anyway, I think that will, we'll see a little later, kind of bring everything related to this budget into light and leave us where we want to be. So with that, we'll turn it over to Mrs. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Gello. Can everybody hear me? I don't need my teacher voice, right? Okay. You all need the Okay, so good evening. So as Mr. Gello points out, this is the last in our series of work sessions to craft the 2019-20 budget. Tonight, Mrs. Pilati, who is our Assistant Superintendent for Business, will provide a brief review of the status of the proposed budget, and we will answer any questions that you may have. So just in time to meet its April 1st deadline, the legislature and the governor reached an agreement on the state budget, resulting in a net increase to our district of $98,734 from the January projection. So that enabled us to close the gap from our previous projections, and Mrs. Pilati will speak about that shortly. The governor made it clear that there would not be a state budget without the property tax cap being made permanent, and it was, and without any changes, much to our chagrin. We were hoping for a collection of adjustments, and in particular, BOCES capital and payments in lieu of taxes, which are better known as pilots. The enacted budget authorizes schools to establish a reserve fund for the teacher retirement system costs. The reserve is technically a sub-fund of the existing ERS reserve, and contributions are limited to 2% annually of TRS payroll, with a total cap of 10% of TRS payroll. Students eligible for reduced price lunches will no longer need to pay a portion of the lunch expense every day. We were very happy that the approved budget does not consolidate BOCES, transportation, and 9 other aid categories into a new services aid formula. It also does not incorporate the governor's proposals to reduce building aid reimbursement. The enacted budget does include language from standalone legislation that had already passed both houses that permanently disconnects state-mandated assessments from APPR scores. So we'll continue to work to develop a better evaluation system than the poorly concocted one that we all now live with. The approved budget does include the governor's proposals for changes to the Star Property Tax Relief Program. And one last comment about the new state budget. It includes a provision authorizing the governor's budget director to prepare a plan to reduce local assistance spending by up to 1% in the event that the state budget deficit of, in the event there is a state budget deficit of $500 million or more. So school aid would not be exempt from this possible reduction and could be cut. The legislature would have 30 days to contest it and adopt an alternative plan, or allow the budget director's plan to go into effect. The fact that legislative leaders went along with this and agreed that there is a need for such a mechanism is of concern, as well as the prospect that someday it could be used. This has existed previously, not in recent years. It has not been implemented recently, but we always keep an eye on that. So as far as our budget goes, as of yesterday, these are the projected class sizes, average class sizes for the 2019-20 school year. They changed even from last week. So we're in the throes of our CSE, CPSE program. So we have students moving around across buildings, across the district, and into and outside of the district. So I'm pleased that we're able to maintain these levels while presenting a budget that supports a well-rounded instructional program, addresses the socio-emotional needs of our students, and keeps our extracurricular program and athletic program intact. As I've mentioned in previous work sessions, we will continue to monitor these very, very closely to ensure that our class sizes are maintained at a good level. So at this time, I am going to turn the presentation over to Mrs. Pilati, and she'll talk a little bit about the specific finances as they relate to the district. Thank you.
Good evening. There are three main sources of revenue that school districts have, property taxes being the largest. And of course, the amount of taxes that we can levy is subject to the tax cap, which has now become permanent. State aid is the second major source of revenue for districts. And it can either be formula-driven, such as foundation aid, or expense-driven, which is like transportation aid or BOCES aid, which you just get reimbursed the year following the expenditure. Other local sources of revenue include pilot payments, as we mentioned, payments in lieu of taxes, non-resident tuition payments that we receive, rental income, interest income. Our district's funding profile consists approximately of 68% of property taxes, and just over 28% of our revenue comes from state aid. Only 3.2% is made up of other revenues, and just under 1% consists of fund balance. In the first budget work session, we talked about the budget formula and how since the tax cap was enacted, the budget formula was kind of flipped upside down. First, districts now have to calculate their restricted tax levy, which we have done, and we submit that to the state by March 1st. Then we add in any projected state aid, which we finally have our numbers now. We add in any projected revenues we expect to earn in the following year, as well as any appropriated fund balance, any use of reserves, and what you're left with is your expenditure budget, your financial plan for the following school year. So the first part of that formula is the allowable tax levy limit. And as I mentioned, we have calculated that already. We went through the whole formula. It was very exciting if you missed it during the first budget work session. And our tax levy is $85,505,745. That represents a 2.37% increase over the prior year. And that is within our allowable levy limit. Now, in order to calculate the actual tax rate that we would need for next year, we need three numbers. The districts only control one part of that. We control the tax levy, which we know. However, we also need to know the assessed value of the entire district, as well as the equalization rates, which we don't have. And we don't receive those from the town until early fall. However, everyone is usually interested in knowing how the tax levy will affect their own taxes. So, in order to help determine what the implication would be to an average homeowner, we took the average assessed value of a home in West Islip, which is $45,000, and we calculated that the tax increase would be $199, or 2.37% increase over the prior year. We also provide instruction on how to calculate your own tax increase, which is in our budget newsletter, which goes out to all of the residents before the budget vote. State aid is another part of that budget formula. As we mentioned, we have a 2.92% increase in state aid over last year. We weren't actually projected to receive any increase in foundation aid with the last run of the budget. We're now looking at a 1.9% increase in foundation aid, which, as Mr. Geller mentioned, helped us close our budget gap. It's also important to point out that these are also still projections because as a lot of these are expense-driven aids, if we don't expense the money, then we don't receive the aid. The other revenue category for West Islip includes things such as pilots, continuing education, which is like adult education, driver's education, tuition from other districts, which could be for non-resident tuition payments that we receive for students who go here from other districts, or for parentally placed students who are attending a private school located in our district. There's health services, rental of real property, which you might notice it decreases significantly for next year, and that's due to the fact that BOCES is not renewing their lease at the Massara School. We also have miscellaneous income, which includes things such as refunds. Overall, we're projecting an increase in other revenue of 1.85%. Assigned fund balance is the last piece of that budget formula. This is an amount that is appropriated to partially fund the subsequent year's budget. we are looking at a 10% decrease in appropriated fund balance for next year. And when you put all of those pieces together, you can see the total budget formula. Starting with our restricted tax levy, which is going to increase about 2.37%, our state aid increasing at 2.92%, our other revenues about 1.85%, and our appropriated fund balance, which is decreasing at 10%. And what we're left with is an expenditure budget of $125,903,812. That is our school budget for 2019-20, and that represents a 2.41% increase over the prior year's budget. That will be proposition number 1 on the ballot on May 21st. We also have 2 other propositions on May 21st that you'll see. The second is to establish a capital reserve fund, and the third relates to voter registration. Currently in our district, we have 4 reserve funds. We have an employee benefits accrued liability reserve fund, and that's simply to pay payments related to any unused leave days that an employee is entitled to when they retire or when they are terminated. We have a retirement contribution fund. And as Superintendent Burns mentioned, right now that currently is just for the payments related to ERS. However, with this new enacted budget, we are allowed to create, with board resolution, a sub-fund related to TRS. We have a workman's compensation reserve fund as well as an unemployment reserve fund. So Proposition 2 is looking to establish a capital reserve fund, which is for the payment of any future capital projects. A capital reserve fund allows a district to save money for future capital projects that would otherwise have to be funded through the budget or through a bond. So it's really beneficial to a district because we're avoiding increases in our operating budget, as well as any increases in incurred costs such as interest costs from borrowing. Voter authorization is required to establish this fund, as well as any time we would like to expend from the fund. So anytime we have projects that we would like to do out of the capital reserve fund, the board has to publicize this, make the community aware of the costs of these projects, exactly what they entail, and then it goes up for a vote to the community. This reserve will actually be funded from any remaining surplus monies at year end. Therefore, there's no additional cost to the taxpayers. The voter registration proposition relates to the fact.
I'm sorry, can you just explain what happens to surplus funds?
Sure, so, good point, thanks. The capital reserve is going to be funded from any surplus monies, which is the way all of our reserve funds are really funded. A budget is a plan, it's an estimate. So of course there are things in a budget such as, let's say, health insurance. Every year health insurance percentages change, and they change according to the calendar year, not our fiscal year. So every January, the rates change. However, we don't have a crystal ball, so we can just estimate based on historical trends what we think the last 6 months of next year, for example, will be. Now again, that's an estimate. So at year ends, when you have things such as overages or under amounts that you appropriated, you're allowed to take those excess monies and you can keep up to 4% of the following year's budget as an unassigned fund balance. Anything over and above that can be allocated to your reserves. So we have 4 reserves currently. So anything that we are able to allocate to those reserves, we can from that excess fund balance. And this will just be another source for us to use those monies for. And again, the benefit is, whereas an ERS reserve is great, it's for ERS payments, a capital reserve really benefits the community because we're able to do projects and they'll directly benefit our kids and our students. The voter registration proposition relates to the fact that currently, in order for a resident to be able to vote, to register to vote, they have to come to the district 1 day per year. It's usually in May, and it's about a 6-hour window that they have, and they're able to register with the district clerk. This proposition will will authorize the district clerk to register any resident from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. whenever school is in session. It just makes it much more convenient for our residents, and that's what many districts do. So this concludes our 4th budget work session, and we currently have we will have 3 board trustee seats that will be open at the end of this fiscal year, and those nominating petitions are due back to district office by April 22nd. We have our budget adoption on April 16th in the Beach Street Auditorium, And May 9th is our public hearing, which is at the Beach Street Auditorium. And of course, the most important is our budget vote on May 21st. Any questions?
With the capital reserve budget, so you're saying you have an overage, say, in your health insurance budget, you can take that money and put it to the capital budget?
So at the end of the year, yes, you take your budget. So let's say we had a budget of $10,000, but due to estimates and whatever, we only actually spent $8,500. That $1,500, you're allowed, per New York State education law, to allocate that money into reserves.
Any reserve, so it doesn't have to go to the health insurance reserve?
No, that's correct.
But if wherever, the way that our system is set up now, whichever one of the existing reserves we choose to put it in,
There's limitations.
it can only be used for that purpose.
Right.
So if we put it in ERS, we can only use it for ERS. We can't then turn around and use it to help pay for something that the schools need, you know,
Right.
for a ball field or books or something like, well, books wouldn't be a good choice, but it's not capital improvement. But whereas if we put it in capital reserves, this new capital reserve fund, now we have flexibility. So in essence, the way the system works now, the money kind of goes into purgatory, into limbo.
What are the current balances of those reserves? Are they high, are they?
They're actually at a healthy level right now. You'll see in Newsday, a lot of districts get written up for being overfunded and our reserves.
We're underfunded.
We are not overfunded. So in that budget formula, there was a line that says, use of reserves. A lot of districts that are being written up in Newsday or had the OSC come in, they're taking those reserves and appropriating them to help with their budget, to reduce the tax levy, because they know they're in trouble already. We are not in that situation. We're finally getting to healthy levels, which is important because that also helps us get better bond rating. It helps us to get a lower interest rate. So it does help us have no fiscal stress with the OSC.
And a few years ago, if you recall, we were listed as being under moderate
Right.
fiscal stress.
It was the second highest level.
Right, the second highest level.
And now we're at none.
Ms. Bly, you mentioned, but just clarification on the capital fund that's established and the board decides to use some of that for a capital project, that would be a proposition vote in the next election, and it would define what the funds are going to be
It's
used.
very clear. It has to be publicized at public board work sessions. We have to give exactly what the projects are that are going to be done and the estimated costs. And so everyone has that information beforehand, and then it's a proposition, a very detailed proposition on the vote.
So the voters have a lot of say in what
Yes.
projects are.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes this meeting. The next event will be, in terms of budget, will be the budget adoption. And hope to see you all there, and hope everybody gets out to vote this year. Thank you very much. Good night.